Hi everyone, this is Yeri of Astrology Healing Arts, and I am going to talk about Jupiter through the houses, both natal position and by transit. There is big Jupiter energy happening right now as Jupiter in the tropical Western Zodiac is about to move out of Gemini and into Cancer on Monday, June the 9th. However, this information will be relevant whenever you come to it because I'm simply going to outline Jupiter through the houses, both by natal position and by transit. And so I'll go in sections and I'll explain each one. So I'll explain Jupiter through the first house, natally, and by transit, and then I'll go on to the next. So you can easily skip ahead if you would like to. I have written about Jupiter in my book, Psychic Self-Defense and the Zodiac, in a chapter that explains Mars as the great warrior and Jupiter the protector. And Jupiter is basically known in astrology as the great benefic, and it also has to do with abundance, higher education, and travel. It's the planet of pomp and ceremony and big attitudes and doing things in a big way. It's really about expansion all across the board. The qualities associated with Jupiter can be magnanimous and kind, or cocky and egotistical. And a lot of this will depend on its placement and relationship to other planets. So just know that Jupiter is not doing anything in a small way. Whatever expression it takes, it's going to be big. It's going to be massive and very expressive. I will say that Jupiter going into Cancer is generally seen as a very positive thing because it is exalted in Cancer, where the nurturing qualities of the cosmic mother come forth, and there's just this overall sense of wealth and goodness and being able to settle our energies after a whirlwind of activity that Jupiter and Gemini brought about. Now that's been covered, I'm ready to begin my explanation of Jupiter through the houses, starting with Jupiter in the first house by natal position. Natal Jupiter in house 1 is one of the most powerful places for Jupiter to be. I believe that is both from a Western and Vedic perspective. Jupiter in the first house produces a lot of power and energy in the personality and in the physical body itself. There's a lot of vitality, and it can be directed in a number of different areas. So if the person is more physical, this would come out as they would be into sports or bodybuilding, or they would just be very competitive in the field of, whatever business endeavors they're involved in. If they were more academic, that would come out in that way, that in the field of academia, they would be very vocal and very engaged and very self-motivated. They would be the type of person that goes off and does their own research. They don't depend on the university or the leader in any category to facilitate activities. They are very driven individuals. Some of the negative traits associated with this position are egotism and indulgence, because a person with Jupiter in the first house generally wants to do things their way. And that's fine. It's not necessarily a problem, and it doesn't always play out the same for everyone. But I have noticed a number of individuals with this placement who get very cocky, and they are natural leaders, and they will do things on their own volition. But sometimes they can run over other people. Some of these people are very oblivious to the actual needs and concerns of others around them because they have a one-track mind and they are doing this thing their way. And they think they might see things in a very broad way instead of, they might miss certain details. Again, this is not always the case, but it very often occurs. With Jupiter transiting the first house, there is an increase of energy, an increase of libido, appetite, just overall vision, excitement for a person's life. This is usually a positive transit because it gives life to, it energizes, it amplifies whatever's there. In some cases, this would be very negative. In some cases, It could exacerbate certain physical issues or mental aberrations. This is overall a very exciting and stimulating influence. So, if a person has been spending a lot of time alone or indoors, they might suddenly come out and begin to socialize again. They're coming out of their shell, and they just might find that it's easier to draw upon their existing gifts because they've come out of the 12th house influence. Now they're into the first house, and it's an energy of coming out into the day and into the social scene and bringing something forth, bringing the gifts forth. It becomes easier overall to relate to other people because it's an energy of having been very inverted or introverted or cut off, whether by choice or circumstance. Now it's easier to get back into the flow of things. Now, the danger here is that someone might go overboard and suddenly they have access to things they didn't before, or they just, they might overdo it. It's easy to overdo it with Jupiter transiting through this house, to overeat, to just indulge whatever the thing is, sex, everybody's different, but if it were directed in a more conscious, wise way, then Jupiter going through the first house would increase one's overall capacity to take in and circulate energy. So if they were into healing arts or martial arts or something like a discipline, this would be a very helpful influence in that regard. Jupiter in the natal second house can be a very fortunate influence financially because it does produce abundance of resources in some way, or the ability to attract and to accumulate wealth or things of value over time, especially. So a lot of times people that have Jupiter in the second house, they tend to be not necessarily greedy or acquisitive in the typical way that we understand, but they are always thinking of what they might need, not just for today, but for tomorrow, and not just for themselves, but also for their loved ones, for their family. And so they will do what it takes to acquire those things. And they tend to always find a way to make it happen. They can be very artistic as well because this house has an underlying influence of Venus. So these people, they tend to be attractive people with an attractive home, or just, sort of a flair for colors and shapes. And this could play out in gardening, for example. These people would be very good at gardening or interior design or something of that nature. And they, whether or not they are into things like fashion, they just have this sense of what's beautiful, and they like to be around beauty in nature as well. And the negative side of this house placement of Jupiter is that they could become very extravagant sometimes. Sometimes the money just goes right through their fingers. So they could make large amounts of money and then all of a sudden it's gone. The good news is that they're usually able to make it again, but it doesn't ever stay, it's not a secure income. It's because they make big, they spend big. They don't do anything in a small way. So the same could go for their eating habits, or sexual habits. But overall, this is a positive placement of Jupiter. Jupiter transiting through the second house is a very positive influence as well, because it tends to increase the amount of money that's coming in or opportunities that are coming in. It's not always in the form of finance or money as we think of money, but it could be energy exchange. It could be that, a person suddenly feels that they have a kind of cushion of abundance and security around them that they haven't had in a long time. It's finally coming to them. It's finally they're getting their lucky break. In some cases, it's that a person will, suddenly take an interest in investments in things such as stocks and bonds and Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. In today's world, that's the form it could take. And some people might literally hit the lotto. I'm not going to say that's the ordinary thing, because then everyone will have an expectation, oh, yay, Jupiter going through my second. But in a lot of cases, it's just like a general flow of prosperity and abundance that comes easier than it did before. And it's also great for any sort of renovations in a person's home, because it will make it easier to either come up with ideas or resources to be able to do that in a more efficient and also fun way. So a lot of times Jupiter in the second house will cause people to have a different, more positive viewpoint about their circumstances or their life, because this is also the house of self-worth. So if they felt like they were not worthy in some way, they might come into a greater understanding of their own self-worth. The greatest danger with this transit is that people might suddenly feel more lucky than they actually are, which tends to lead toward activities such as gambling. So gambling is discouraged, wise investments are encouraged. Jupiter in Natal House 3 is a very lively placement. People that have Jupiter in the third house tend to be natural orators, speakers, very involved with the community. They are confident, they are forward with their thoughts and their questions, and they tend to be very engaging with others. Sometimes they talk too much. Sometimes they never stop talking. But in any case, the conversation is never going to be boring. These people tend to be very intellectually diverse and very interesting people to get to know, to get to talk to. And they are curious. They do ask questions. It's not that they only want to talk to hear themselves talk, but they enjoy hearing other people. They tend to be happy-go-lucky people in general. They tend to come from some background in which they were allowed to be and express themselves freely. Commonly, you will see that Jupiter in the third house people are very involved with their family, their siblings, even their parents, and definitely their community and the people that they consider, even their spirit family. And they're always on the go. They love to just travel around and get to know people. And if they are more of a stationary type of person, then they would, like if they say they owned a little shop in town or something, their shop would probably always have people coming and going, and they would always be engaged in conversation. The negative thing about these people is that they can be very scattered, mentally restless. Sometimes they can be argumentative. In some cases, they can just talk way too much. You can't even get a word in edgewise. But that is not always the case. It definitely can happen. I've seen it. But Jupiter in the third house, it's very, the mind is always full. There's always a lot to do. So it can be difficult sometimes for these people to either to meditate or to pull their energy in, because they're just very active and sometimes a little too active mentally. So they could always be on their phones or on the computer. They could be, opinionated people too. So they're always dropping their comments or, their 2 cents on things. When Jupiter transits the third house, there is an increase of mental energy and communication, and the pace of life might pick up. Places to go, people to see, a lot of times visits with family members, and just a lot more outings, going outside. And, if someone's been cooped up inside, they're going to be outside. If they've been more focused on their their business, their work life. They want to go and have more fun, or at least after work go hang out with their buddies at the bar or go out to eat somewhere. It's kind of, it will also be a time that's favorable for any sort of education, whether the person is studying or doing the teaching. A person might suddenly have an opportunity or invitation to do speaking. They might have a greater platform, or they might suddenly find themselves involved in publications or in the media in some way. Problems arise when they get a bit stuffy in their ideas and start pushing their ideas onto other people. If this happens, then, they need to take a stand back and understand that not everyone sees things the way that they do. And they can also just get caught up in their judgments, and they can also become very scattered and not sure what they are doing in life. This is another possible problem with Jupiter transiting the third. They need to become very practical. A lot of times people begin to feel very ungrounded when this transit occurs, so they benefit from having a discipline in their life, whether that's a disciplined thing, like something simple though, not it doesn't have to be elaborate. In fact, the more simple, the more effective the discipline. I get up at this time. I eat breakfast at this time, I eat dinner at this time. Those types of things will help immensely with this transit. Jupiter in the natal 4th house brings spaciousness to the home life, and literally in one's house, especially in later years. But even in the first part of life, there tends to be room enough for the person to grow and to be themselves, to be comfortable, to be provided for. Their needs are provided for. And so these people tend to be very grounded in their own space. They tend to be very domestic in some ways, family oriented. They take care of their families. They naturally assume a sort of motherly or paternal role with not only their family, but their closest friends. And they love to be a host or hostess in their own home. They often love to spend time outside puttering around in the garden. And that's just a gift that these people have with things that are small and need care, like small animals and small things in the garden. They love to just watch things grow. They tend to be very good in the kitchen as well, very creative, which could lead them into the culinary arts because they're so good with food. And they just, again, they love to nurture others, and they often tend to enjoy eating as well. And sometimes they might overdo it when it comes to eating. Certainly not always the case, but they generally have a good fortune when it comes to being able to provide for themselves and for their loved ones all of the basic necessities, because this is something that they always had in their life, so they're able to pay it forward. And it does tend to be the case that as life goes on, the pressures that they had when they were younger begin to lift, and things become easier, more enjoyable, and certainly in many cases more spacious around them. When Jupiter begins to transit the 4th house, there is an increase of some kind of spiritual or familial energy, a focus on family or a focus on religion or spirituality or philosophy that begins to permeate one's home environment. So, for example, if you have Jupiter transiting through this house, you might feel the desire to create an altar for yourself to honor either, a specific deity, or to actually begin to spend time in meditation, to quiet your mind. It's a time of quieting your energy in some way, gathering your forces. And it could be a time when you begin to have people over, family members staying with you for an extended visit. It could be that your focus is more on taking care of people, but if that's not the case, also that could take the form of course, of a pet that comes into your life. But it could also just be that you are now spending more time in cultivation of your own life force energy or of spiritual energy. And you could also benefit through real estate, or you could find that this is a time where you're wanting to invest or buy, or you're looking at, you're somehow looking at securing your future. You're thinking more about tomorrow instead of today. You're thinking more long term about your investments. So it could be that, you have more domestic pressures and responsibilities that fall on your shoulders. So you need to make sure that you carve out enough time for yourself, because with Jupiter transiting the fourth, in some way, home life is going to change, either become more busy, more of a theme, or it's going to draw a person in more to their own personal practice, into the inner sanctum of their own soul, which would lead to stillness and silence. Jupiter in the natal fifth house produces an abundance of creative energy, inspiration, imagination. This is a very lively position for Jupiter, because people who have Jupiter in this house by birth, they are naturally very artistic, and they are always producing, they are always imagining, they are always creating in some way, shape, or form. They tend to be very passionate people. Oftentimes they wear their heart on their sleeve. They're very open and gregarious people. So passionate, and sometimes their passions can lead them down roads that get them into trouble, because they also tend to be very sensual people. And, if they don't have enough either, discipline in that way, or, they don't really put a filter on how much love they can give. And so sometimes it's that they give too much of themselves, and then later down the line they regret it. But in any case, I see that a lot of people that have Jupiter in this fifth house, they are extremely gifted. And so they need a number of different outlets to express their gifts, because they are, they might have one major sort of outlet for their artistic expression, such as painting, but there are usually other avenues as well, because for them, the whole essence of their existence is around that sort of being able to express and see life in a much broader way than the rest of the people, right? Because they are very expansive in their views in general. And so they tend to bring that through their creations, whatever those creations might be. With Jupiter transiting the fifth house, there is an increase of creative inspiration and or social activity, because it increases the energy and the tempo of one's life in some way. And so that is generally favorable for any sort of social activities, or any sorts of activities that would, bring a person more out into the world to become noticed in some way. And they might become more involved in, just more involved in traveling. There's an increase of movement, and there's an increase of, I want to say, cultural enrichment, not necessarily through, education, through lots of reading. It could be that way, but it's usually through actually experiencing, firsthand through the arts, experiencing different forms of creative expression in different cultures, for example. And this could be a time when a person falls in love with someone. It could increase the romance, and, it could increase one's magnetism. So they might simply attract a lot more attention from the opposite sex or something like that. And they also might become pregnant or have a focus more on children or young people in some way. So this would be a favorable transit for either a woman that wants to conceive, or for a person that is working with children, because they would have probably better results during this transit. And or if someone wanted to write a children's book, for example, this would be a really great transit and time to do so. There could be some overindulgence, especially in sensual ways when it comes to foods, or just, someone that's prone to being promiscuous. It's really not a good look. It's not a good time. It could be for that person, but usually there's a price to be paid later on for those types of activities. So just something to be mindful of. Jupiter in the natal 6th house produces a very service-oriented nature. And if you have Jupiter in the 6th house, you work very hard, you work consistently, and you work often in a way that does not draw a lot of attention to yourself. So, for example, a person with Jupiter here, they would be very dedicated in whatever line of work they are involved in, no matter how mundane or mystical it is, but they're not really advertising their services. They are there to get the task accomplished and then go home. And, these people are they have their lives pretty well compartmentalized, and they are, they're very mindful of the needs of those around them. Sometimes they forget themselves, so that works to their detriment because they're so busy tending to the needs of other people that they might miss several meals, or they just might not get enough rest or downtime, and until it really catches up with them, and then they realize, oh, I feel like heck, I really need to stop everything now, because they push, they just keep going. They're like Energizer bunnies. And, they might have really great health or really poor health, depending on a number of other factors. So there are both types of people here. There are those that have robust health because Jupiter is in the house of health and it lends itself to their overall vitality, or they are always plagued with different issues, or, they have problems with digestion, problems with their liver. In general, they are, they are pretty mindful about their diets. Again, there are some that would just not care at all about what they eat, and it's usually one extreme or the other. Those that are very, very mindful overall, and then those who just, they just eat whatever they want and then suffer the consequences later. They tend to be confident people and well-rounded in a lot of different areas, but it's that their life seems to be often consumed by work. Jupiter transiting the 6th house brings improved working conditions, opportunities for employment or getting a raise, getting a promotion at work, becoming a manager, these types of things. Also for overall improvement in one's health. So this could be a time when a person suddenly has more, they have the idea and the means to be able to pamper themselves, give themselves a makeover, or maybe they are just drawn to different sorts of alternative medicine, and they want to go and they want to get a Reiki session or chiropractic. They want to get the whole, package that comes with the physical and the mental and the spiritual combined. This is the holistic medicine. And so instead of going to the doctor and asking for a diagnosis and getting the pills, they're going to go seek out alternative means, usually that have some sort of greater philosophical or spiritual meaning behind it. And in general, this could be a good time for, they would be drawn to institutions, places of worship, places of education, higher education. So it could be a time if one wanted to go back to college or something of that nature that really expands their horizons in an educational and philosophical sense. Jupiter in the 7th house tends to place a huge emphasis on interpersonal relationships, both in a business sense and also in terms of long-term partnership. There is often a focus on marriage, and these people tend to have at least 2 significant long-term partnerships that have an impact in their life. And that could take the form of 2 marriages. Often they marry into or get involved with a person who has also had another significant relationship before them. And you often see this sort of, if not a relationship that's based on, starting over in life, then it would be one where it's like the person already has kids, and there could be this sort of Brady Bunch family going on where one partner has a couple of kids already, and then they have a couple of kids and they all get together, and the rest is history. There is a danger of rehashing old stories from previous relationships with this placement. Generally, Jupiter in the 7th house brings benefits through marriage, through partnership. So if you have Jupiter in the 7th, you tend to be fortunate when you combine your resources with another, actually when you get together with another person that has probably more resources than yourself. You benefit whether directly or indirectly, because now you have more of an opportunity, or you have more support to become more wealthy and influential yourself. So even if there is a divorce or separation that occurs, there are usually benefits that the person, receives. It's usually on an amicable rather than, with a lot of drama. There tends to be sort of an agreement that's made. And this is not always what happens. Sometimes a person remains happily involved with someone, or even single. Maybe the focus is more on the business, aspect of relationships and agreements. And in that case, the same would go. If it doesn't work out, ultimately, you would end it on a positive note where it would be win-win for both of you. Jupiter transiting the 7th house brings a focus on public relations, on relationships in general, and it tends to be favorable for marriage, for partnership, and also for political campaigns or legal entanglements. This could be a time, if you have any legal issues, then you would have better luck working with a lawyer at this time. You would have more chances of winning a case, and you would have support from friends, family, from people around you that would just, lend themselves to the whole situation for your greater outcome. And it's also a good transit for, if you are alone in life or you feel lonely, to get out on the dating scene again. You might or you might not decide to commit to one person, but it would at least take you out of that feeling that you're alone, and you would feel again involved. You would feel like you are a part of things again, or you would just feel like you would regain a sense of attractiveness. You would gain a sense of your own ability to attract in general, not just in the form of a partnership, but in general. It's a positive influence for your own intellect, for your own magnetism, and just your own bringing balance to your interpersonal affairs. And one other benefit to the transit of Jupiter through the seventh house is that you might have a feeling of artistic inspiration or intellectual stimulation. You might be drawn to the literary arts, or you might just feel that you want to surround yourself with more beauty, and that in itself is enough to give you a feeling of fulfillment in your life. Natal Jupiter in the 8th house is a very intense and intriguing placement that brings a lot of interesting and also contradictory energies into a person's life. There's a lot of passion and willpower and an attitude of fearlessness in many situations. And this can help advance a person in a lot of different areas, but it can also obviously get them into trouble. There is a very strong sensual nature here that can also get a person into trouble. But if they are spiritually inclined, it can lead them on a path of intense evolution and expansion. In many cases, there is this pull toward occultism and studies of the darker side of life. And that is also because the person is drawn toward the esoterica, and they are fearless. They will go into the dark corridors to discover and plumb the depths and see what they can see, and then bring that up because they also have an interest in exposing those hidden truths or gems that they have found. They tend to have fortune in the way of inheritance or, legal settlements in their favor, or they will acquire a mass lump of money for some reason or another. But again, because this is a very intense house, it might involve something unpleasant, at least on the onset. And then, they'll have the benefit thereafter. But there is a lot of really powerful energy in this house, in this placement with Jupiter there, because it will increase the person's spiritual aura, so to speak, and their proclivity towards spiritual practices in general. They often do need to look before they leap because they are so driven by their own will, and they don't often think about the consequences of their actions. Jupiter transiting through the 8th house can bring very mystical or mysterious experiences into the person's life. A person might find that their own psychic faculties are increased, and this could lead to a number of different experiences, including out-of-body experiences. It can bring about a fascination with death and the afterlife, or it could bring a person into contact with non-physical entities. And this could be because a person is going out of their way to make such contact, or this could come unbidden, and this could be a very disconcerting sort of influence for some people. There might be more of a focus on healing for some individuals. With Jupiter transiting the 8th house, there may be more visits to hospitals, there may be a visit to the morgue or to cemeteries for some reason. Or there could be just more of a focus on, even things that have to do with business and the living, or trusts and wills. Usually this will have to do in some way with death and with things that deal with, goods and transactions surrounding death or surrounding, people's assets. But in any case, this influence will, it will bring a feeling usually of abundance too in some way. And if a person wants to increase their financial flow, this could be a helpful, supportive transit in that way. But it will still be necessary to have some sort of means of psychic protection or boundary psychic self-defense, because the person's psychic, their energy field is expanded, and there might be some influences that are not so pleasant coming in, or that could interfere with regular everyday activities. So that is just something to be mindful of with Jupiter transiting the 8th house. Benefits may come through joint finances and joint investments. Now we are moving on to Jupiter in the 9th house, where it is very much at home. This is an auspicious placement for Jupiter, where it naturally expresses itself through higher education, travel, and philosophy. There is a great thirst here for knowledge, for cultural enrichment, for reaching spiritual heights, and for sharing the knowledge with others. There is a great deal of zeal and passion for the spiritual side of life, to explore the realms beyond this realm. And there is usually a certain amount of freedom that the person has, even if it's just in their own mind, to explore. There's usually a great love of reading and writing and teaching and learning and going to school, and it never ends. This is carried on for the rest of one's days. It makes a person an eternal student, as the saying goes, because there is just so much love of knowledge. There may be a skill with writing and speaking, doing podcasts, things of that nature. Usually the person will have a lot to say, a lot to share, and it really is a big part of their life. There is often a focus around family, and family relationships are either very positive or stressful for this person. And that would especially be through grandparents and in-laws, who could be the source of prosperity or the source of grief. It really depends on a lot of other things in the person's chart. But in any case, the person comes out the other side. Usually, they, in some way, shape, or form, they are able to, at least with their perspective, gain more of a sense of abundance in their life, usually through their own efforts, because they know how to go after what they want with a lot of gusto and energy, and because of that, they tend to be successful overall. With Jupiter transiting the 9th house, there is a shift and expansion of one's spiritual views, and often a shift in their ethical and moral orientation and views. And there might be an increase of responsibility in these areas, or there might simply be more of an awareness that gives more freedom to act, knowing that one is literally behind the steering wheel, literally or metaphorically behind the steering wheel in their life. And so this really is a favorable transit for expanding in one's knowledge bank, in the fields of teaching, in the fields of publication. Many people might feel suddenly called to write a book or share a story or give a speech during this transit that is significant and moving. And usually there's also an interest in travel, if not literally, then in some way mentally the person will become interested in other places, other realities, and this will be a very enriching influence for the person to be able to increase or expand their sense of place in the world at large. This is a transit that could make one become more aware of their bias, and so they seek to, they might look to religion or philosophy or, different sorts of, points of view to increase their understanding and to break out of their own patterns. This is the one that, this is the transit where someone decides, I'm going to break my own habit instead of waiting for something cataclysmic or dramatic to happen to kick me in the butt so that it's traumatic and I'm forced to change. No, it's like, I really willingly want to expand. I want to change. I want to grow. I am ready. Bring it on. Let's go. So it's a very powerful transit for making changes in one's life that bring a sense of clarity and freedom. Now, moving on to Jupiter in the 10th house. The 10th house is one of the most auspicious places for Jupiter because it brings the greatest chances of overall success and prosperity, especially when this is found on or very close to the midheaven, because it puts the person into prominence. It puts them into the limelight or into a position of leadership or into positions where their mere presence is looked upon favorably. So that gives them better opportunities for success. And it also gives a lot of drive and motivation and energy in order to carry through on plans. Jupiter in the 10th house might especially highlight a career in the medical field or in government, again, because these types of occupations demand a great deal of attention and responsibility. You can't just float off into space or twiddle your thumbs or, be looking at magazines all day. You really have to be attentive to the demands and the needs of other people. So this is a placement that can bring a lot of prosperity because the person is in positions that, again, that are very needed, by a lot of people, and also because they have such high standards that they are willing to do what it takes to make those things happen, to make sure everything is taken care of. Sometimes this can, just like with Jupiter in the first house, can produce people that have quite a bit of an ego or a big ego in some cases. It really depends on a lot of things, the sign, the aspects that Jupiter is making, but the person might not only have a position of prominence and importance, but they might have an attitude of entitlement. So they need to make sure that they are doing something that is in fact worthwhile and as great a contribution to society as they claim themselves to be. In most cases, though, these people are very generous and they always have something to contribute. And if they don't, then they are not usually happy because they are acting counterintuitively. When Jupiter transits through the 10th house, there are more opportunities for advancement through career endeavors, and there might be honors, public recognition. There might be more people looking up to the person. If this is you, then you will find that people suddenly have more respect for you or look to you as an authority in some way. And so you can exert your influence with more confidence, and you might feel also like you're on top of the world. You might even just have situations in your life that are finally becoming resolved or somehow improved so that you have felt yourself to rise above them. And even if it's not really about your career, then it would be a sense that you've finally come through, you've come out the other side, you've made your exit through the tunnel and you see the light, the worst is behind you, and now you can look forward to new sorts of activities. So usually there's this period of renewal that's associated with this transit, and you also have good fortune with reaching out to people who are in positions of authority in general. You would have better prospects, of gaining the favor of authority figures, people that you look up to. In some cases, it would be the opposite, but it really depends on other things. But overall, this is really favorable for political or legal endeavors. You might feel that you want to become part of a greater organization, especially that relates to something business related that you feel is very important, that makes a big contribution in some way. You want to be careful that you don't get too big full of yourself or full of your overly confident about certain things, because the higher you get, the greater the fall could be. But overall, this is a very positive influence for a lot of advancement in different areas of your life that are important to you. And one other thing, it could actually shine a light on your home life. There could be some positive developments around that, some upgrades, some expansion, and that sort of thing. Natal Jupiter in the 11th house tends to be a positive placement for one's social life. A person benefits through friendships and through people that are the inspiration for that person's own growth and development. So, for example, if you have Jupiter in the 11th house, not only are you well liked and probably popular, and you were probably popular growing up in school, you always had friends, but even as you grow older and in your social life, if you have friends that you look up to, they could say, for example, they're friends that are more successful than you, or maybe they're a little bit older and you see that they are where you want to be someday. Usually you have the benefit of learning directly from them on how to achieve those, goals and outcomes for yourself, because again, you are so liked that people naturally want to share with you, and they want to share their knowledge, their abundance. You tend to have a great deal of affluence around you, and you can become very wealthy in your life. You can attain your wishes and desires often through benefactors and friends, and through being at the right place at the right time. And that doesn't mean that you're always lucky or that you don't have any challenges in your life, but it just means that you always have people in your life that are supportive of you in some way. And so the downside to this is that you sometimes might not see the forest for the trees, or you are not really doing enough introspection, because it's so easy to lean on your friends or to get opinions from other people or things like that, that you're not taking enough time out to really tune into yourself. And if you do that, you will really strengthen your own powers of observation and intuition and psychic ability. And then you'll find that you will come up with your own solutions to your own problems much quicker and easier than if you wait for someone else to, give you a cue or a pointer. With Jupiter transiting the 11th house, you have great opportunities to expand your circle of friends, your networking, your collaborations with others may increase. It's not a time to go at things alone. It's really a time to reach out and to connect, to get to know your neighborhood, to get to know just people that you haven't had the time for before because you were too busy with work. And now you have these opportunities coming up. And it would be a shame not to take advantage of them and not to listen to the call of your heart, because there are some very great opportunities to either connect or reconnect with important people in your life that can actually help you to, if you were off track, to get you back on track, to get you in touch with something like a long lost hope, dream, or wish, because this is the house of hopes and dreams. And you might have some very unusual opportunities coming up for travel or for advancement or in a spiritual sense. You might have unusual experiences. It's hard to say exactly what form this will take, but usually it will lead you on some sort of adventure of the mind and of the spirit, where you get to just kind of think outside your own box and act outside your own box and just have different kinds of experiences and exchanges with other people. And so you might feel that you are getting drawn back into collaboration with people, because if you've been going at things alone, or you've been the leader, or you've had to just carry a lot on your shoulders, now you have the opportunity to share and exchange your ideas and just, shoot the breeze or just have fun. For some people, with Jupiter transiting the 11th house, it's just about lightening up because things have been too serious and you need to just, catch a breather. You need to just go out and see what you can see without having definite goals. Sometimes you need to put your goals aside and just take a deep breath and see life from a different perspective. Natal Jupiter in the 12th house is the prime example of Jupiter serving as a spiritual protector. And that is because the 12th house is the house of hidden enemies, but Jupiter brings a sense of expansion and protection around one so that the inner life can be directed and developed in such a way as to build up reservoirs of energy in the psyche and in the soul to be able to handle difficult situations and people. And there is a great love of solitude here with people that have Jupiter in the 12th house. They tend to be natural healers or people who are involved, drawn into the healing arts or working behind the scenes because they are not people that like to draw a lot of attention to themselves. They prefer to keep a low profile on their activities. And they don't really have big ambitions at least in a worldly sense. They tend to be more focused either on the spiritual side of life or philanthropic endeavors. These people might have a wide circle of friends or just a few close friends, one or two that they keep close in their life. And they might also have enemies that they know about, or that they know they have the enemies, but they don't know why they have these enemies, or they don't know who they are. But here is the common thread with a lot of people that have Jupiter in the 12th house. The enemies are not able to bring any lasting or impactful harm to the Jupiter in 12th house native. They're not allowed. In other words, they might attempt to act in a way that brings harm to this person, but there's always a buffer, and there's always this invisible aid, this invisible shield. That is Jupiter in the 12th house. With Jupiter transiting the 12th house, energy is drawn inward. A person seeks solitude. If you have Jupiter going through your 12th house, most likely this is a time that you want to pull away from the everyday humdrum, the rat race. You want to go in and meditate. You want to be alone. You want silence. You want to extricate yourself from unnecessary conflicts and obligations, and your biggest goal is within yourself. You seek answers to the greater questions in life, and usually you will come into an awareness of facets of existence that previously you were not in touch with. And so it can be a time of great spiritual growth, and you could have peak experiences that really increase your understanding of your place in the scheme of things. You might be drawn to religious studies or spiritual or philosophical studies that give you a greater understanding as well. But in any case, you are going to be acting and thinking very differently than from your previous normal everyday routines. The main danger with this transit is the possibility of falling into depression or a feeling of self-pity or loneliness. You might also become more creatively inspired in a way, in a mystical sort of way, so that if it's music or art, it would also have some sort of spiritual undertone, or it would be moved by, or for some people they would say, oh, I'm now channeling through my art, or they're doing automatic writing, things like that, where it's in an altered state of consciousness, very expansive. So this is a time of spiritual growth and development that requires a lot of space and a lot of solitude in order for great realizations to occur.